Hello, America. Welcome to the Ryan Mack Show podcast. I'm your host, Ryan McKenzie, and this is your place for truth, conservative talk, and the fight to save America. Today's podcast episode is What is Woke? Now, before I get into it, it's important to understand where we are as a country. We see the over-sexualization of kids. We see an over-realization of an ideology from the left that is seeping into every facet of our society. Now, we've always been a diverse country, right? So why is it that the left seems to think that they can just push everything they want over the entire population? Part of what makes us great is our diversity, but it's always been a natural part of our country. Throughout our history, you see that we've had issues with race, from slavery in the beginning to Native American treatment, and the Jim Crow laws during the Civil War era, and even the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s. But if Martin Luther King were alive today, I think even he would be an outspoken critic of the way the left is erupting some of these ideological movements. So today, I want to discuss what it is, in fact, what does it mean to be woke? And it's not enough just to be a past tense of the word wake. That's the most logical definition, right? So a few years ago, this has been a movement by mostly people on the left that think that they can voice their opinion louder. So what is woke? Well, aside from being a past participle of wake, for many decades, it has meant to be conscious or aware, but now it's become a slang term to embrace this progressive activism. Webster Dictionary added the word in 2017, defining it as, quote, aware of and actively attentive to important facts and issues, especially issues of racial and social justice. So later on, the same year, the Oxford Dictionary adopted it, and as well as the Webster Dictionary version, it is also meaning well-informed, up-to-date. So also alert to racial and social discrimination and injustice. So at first, it became this racial outcry for injustice, to be woke, stay woke. So it's a slang term, what English majors would consider just a past tense of the word wake. Now it's become a moniker of the left, and it's particularly groups like Black Lives Matter, which I am not against the movement. Black Lives Matter. They really do. All lives matter. But the organization has become a place of, violent extremism and a Marxist movement that has corrupted the actual movement of, Black Lives Matter. So they've adopted this stay woke mentality. And as much as a few years ago, it was in a song. And this rapper, by the name, I think his name is Meek Mill. I've never heard of him. So this song comes out called Stay Woke, and it became a word in parts of the Black community for those who were self-aware, questioning the common and current paradigm. And in their words, according to Webster, was striving to be better. So there was this movement to think, in their terms, be better and be alert to injustices. So moving on, then you have in 2013 and 2014, remember you all realize that we have different incidents over the years. So, certain parts of these incidents become more ideological based than, what should be. So 2013, 2014, you have Florida man, George Zimmerman. Remember him? He was acquitted in the Trayvon Martin slaying, and it was a police-involved death of Michael Brown in Ferguson. So remember, Black Lives Matter has been a constant play here in these police-involved shootings. And this was no different during this time. And so this phrase, stay woke, became a phenomenon on Twitter into a rallying cry. And so it's become part of Black Lives Matter movement in terms of their active call. They were calling on other activists to stay woke and calling others to stay woke. So in 2018, Meek Mill, the rapper, took the phrase to the top single on his album that year. So the theme was his first song since getting out of prison in April of that year. So that became his rallying cry and opened up this cultural movement. Because he excuses himself, how can I pledge allegiance to the flag when, they're killing all of our sons and all our dads? So he cries a literal exaggeration here of what's happening, what's being happened. And for all you common sense people out there that listen and you see what's going on in our current culture today, that is not actually happening. The statistics don't back up their cry. Police are just mowing down black people. That's not happening. There are incidents, George Floyd and Trayvon Martin, where things are getting a little dicey. But that the grand scheme of things, that's not happening. People aren't just being mowed down by police. So you have this meaning of the word woke. It's a racial injustice cry for Black Lives Matter, and it's still prevalent today as far as racial injustice. But even in the rise of cancel culture now, it becomes even more prevalent. So it's calling on corporations. It's been coming down the pipeline of education as even as local as Central Illinois schools, some of the bigger inner city schools. You're seeing some of these policies and statements and movements affect our children. And so that you have this progressive movement expanding into everything we do. And even most Americans, we become complacent, right? Well, we say, it's not affecting me, so why should I matter? Well, when it starts affecting you, it'll be too late, especially when it starts hitting home in some of these issues today. So it's become more of a rallying cry than just injustice, and now it's become an over-sexualization. And we're seeing backlash coming. But has it been too late? Is it too late to stand up to this radical, progressive, activist movement to corrupt our children, to corrupt future generations? Is it too late to stand up? And I don't think so, but you're seeing the effects of it, even on a local level. So it went from an injustice cry to everything Black Lives Matter, and now into what I believe the over-sexualization of kids and grooming. And you see what has taken place. What used to be just a rallying cry is now a policy-driven movement. And it's become a very diabolical and sinister and evil policy-driven backdrop. So you have, maybe you've seen these terms in some of your employment handbooks. Maybe you've seen publicly through emails where you work that companies, so in the corporate world, you see companies push this diversity, equity, and inclusion policy. We're going to strive to be more diverse. We're going to strive to be more equitable. Well, here's the thing. We've always been a diverse nation. We're a nation of immigrants, right? We have a diverse background. And we've also got laws that prevent being discriminated against, no matter who you are. So this push on equitability and being more diverse is all for naught. It's just an empty voice, because if you get discriminated against, you can simply just call out that foul and call it what it is, and you will more than likely be rewarded for that, because there's laws against you being treated a certain way. But they don't want it to stay at that simple level. They want to take it a step further. They want you to be forced to pretend to go along with their ideological movement. So after the George Floyd, you have riots break out, you have the burnings being destroyed, you have lives being uprooted in some of these major cities. You see most of these cities are controlled by who? Far leftist Democrats. And many times for decades, you see Chicago, LA, San Francisco, New York, some of these really liberal, progressive strongholds for decades being destroyed, what once were great cities, right? So what they think they're causing change for good, they're actually destroying parts of society. And I think it's a bigger issue than just having a voice and saying, well, we need to be equal, we need to be diverse, we need to be equitable, all that stuff. It's a spiritual issue. And you hear a lot of, I've heard pastors talk locally about it. It's not so much of a political left or right issue, it's become a major spiritual issue. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. Now, in terms of the backlash, you're starting to see a major backlash to these movements. You know, the DEI movements locally. I had worked at a local school district, and I won't name names, I won't name who it is, I won't say any of that for reasons, that obviously are common sense. But when schools start implementing these, it becomes part of, they make you say certain vocabulary, they make you breathe it, they make you drink it, they live it. You have to become something you're not, and something that you're not comfortable being, and that's a problem. We're in a country of freedom of speech, freedom to choose what you want to do and what you want to believe in. And the very foundations of those are being under attack by this progressive Marxist movement, this woke ideology, that you are forced to go along with the slimmest of slimmest minority of people that are pushing this movement. Now you have even the top level of our government. You went from corporations to a rallying cry to some of these major Marxist groups. Now you have it in the government, that you have people being hired at the federal level, the highest level of our government, pushing these extremist woke policies and backing them. Even if they don't want to come out and say it publicly, their policies are being driven by these groups. And it's really a nightmare. So on the backlash front, so we have it in education. We had the corporate backlash. We had Coca-Cola come out and say we need to be less white, right? And they had these top 10 lists of why you should be less white. And speaking about racism, that's the most racist thing you can do. Racist towards any color is racist. So they call it racist, when we treat blacks differently. Well, it's the same way. You can't just whitewash and wipe out the entire white race. That's also racist. And you can't be intentionally with that. And they are intentional with their ideas about getting rid of white people. So you have the corporations. They started to go woke a few years ago, right? And you're seeing a backlash with those. So what happened with those? Coca-Cola was forced to take a step back. They were forced to pull back the restraints of their movement because they received so much heat from it. So you're seeing a movement on the right, and I'm grateful for that. But I don't know if at this point it's too late or just keep going, because they love to push, so we need to push right back. It's important for us to take back our country and get back to the basics of where we're from. So you have Coca-Cola, that example, corporations, and you have a whole host of others that decided to try to go woke and follow the left and cave to the progressive far left nuts. Disney is another one, the giant one. I know you guys heard of all their mess of problems. It seeped into grooming for kids and creating stories that maybe had an LGBTQ background in their beginnings, but they forced it to the forefront instead of just naturally including, okay, well, this character was openly gay, this character was this storyline had this in the past. But it's not just a natural implementation of it, it's forced. Like they're taking a character that wasn't gay or wasn't black or wasn't Latino and making it a lead role. And the backlash, well, people stopped watching Disney Plus. They stopped watching Disney, stopped going to their theme parks. The backlash was financial and it was real. So you have corporations that decided to go woke, and there's the backlash. So there's another one, Disney. Disney was the huge one, the biggest story because they're national and global. Then you had Netflix. They tried to go woke, and then look what happened. They canceled their subscriptions. People just left in droves. They said, nope, not doing this. You're going to over-sexualize. You're going to go weird. You're going to make this another way I don't want to go. I'm done. Well, what was the backlash? Now you're seeing it. They're cutting back on their employees who were this far left woke, and you saw them publicly come out and say, if you don't like our episodes, you don't like our shows, you can hit the bricks. They told their employees who disagreed, you can just kick rocks, right? Well, it came from corporations. It came after government. You see it in the current administration now, where they hire and fire based on race. And that's not how our country was built. You built your workforce based on qualifications. You don't build it based on race and skin color. You have an administration who's up and down has gone by checking a box. What is your qualification? Do you know how to communicate? No, but I'm openly gay and an African American. Great. What used to be just a part of who you are and your identity is now for the forefront. That's the only thing that matters, and that has become backwards. Where today we are living in a generations where evil has been brought to be good, and good is evil. So what was just and moral and right has now become wrong, and it really is backwards. And it's time for conservatives to step up and say, "Hey, wait a minute! You're the evil. You're the wrong." And I don't hear enough of that going on. Certainly at the local level, I'm starting to hear it and see it. At the national level, you're hearing our major voices step up and tell us, these are things are evil. We need to push back, and that's really what needs to happen. So you have corporations that went woke. They went back a step because they had backlash. The American people have the biggest voice and the biggest movement. You can vote with your voice. You vote with the ballot boxes. You vote at the elections. You vote with your wallet. Instead of supporting these companies that make these decisions, take your money out of those companies. So you have corporations, you have government, now you have schools, and you have our education system. Now that's the deep dive on our education rot is coming in future episodes. But you have this woke takeover at an education level, where at first it was diversity, equity, and inclusion. Right? It was this racial tie. We need to hire more brown, black, Latin teachers, whatever. Well, now you've got an over-sexualization of our schools, on top of we need to be more diverse. So you're seeing that play out in a backlash, right? Virginia was the biggest on a state level, that parents decided, wait a minute, you're not teaching my kids this sexualization, and it's up to the parents. So they spoke. They woke up and they spoke, and they flipped Virginia, that has been ran by Democrat leftist ideology for decades. It was a very thick blue state, and they flipped all three levels. Something that's very hard to do, but it takes all of us to stand up. So that's one example of an entire state electorate standing up and saying no. And it takes more of us to stand up and say no. The more of us that say no, the more of this stuff goes away. Now, maybe not, but it has to start somewhere. And if you say no, you push back and you take back our children, you take back our schools, and you take back our country. And so you have the education level. And then you have The need to outcast parents as the evil ones and the ones that don't care about their kids, when all reality is you have teachers in some of these bigger schools and these more leftist leaning schools, and the teachers unions having the more powerful voice. So if you're in a teachers union and you're someone who doesn't go along with the political ideology of the teachers union, the major teachers unions, I would encourage you to take a step back and think twice. You may say, well, I'm just every union has their political beliefs and they have more benefits, so that outweighs it. Does it though? Because if you think about it, the more you give to them, the more voice and more money and more power they have. So if you decide to just take that step and get out of the union and stand up and take your voice back, the less power they can have. It's really that simple. You can sit there and say, well, they have a voice for me legally. They have this, they have that. Yes, all that's true, but is it really worth seeing future generations destroyed by simply just having a legal voice on a dispute of contracts? If you're a teacher and you wholeheartedly believe that kids matter and kids' education matters, true education, math, reading, and science, and the core of education, then you need to use your voice and stand up and say, no. No more are you going to take my hard-earned money and create this ideology and think you know more about our kids than we do. So it starts with stepping up and standing up and saying no. That's really the solution to all this woke garbage that has been taking a hold everywhere, from local to national, to this Marxist movement that is eroding our culture as we see it. So you have corporations, you have education level that's going woke, and you're seeing a pushback on both of those. You're seeing people take their money out of corporations and going, nope, I'm going to more American made, I'm going to more conservative places that I know use my money for the right causes, things that I believe in. So take your money, put your voice where you believe in, and put it there, and take it out of these corporations that try to make you do something you don't believe in, because you have that right. And do your research. There are companies, there are places, there are banks even. Banks are going woke with their policies on funding certain things. So take your money out of these big banks and take it local. Find a small local bank that doesn't push some of these extreme social causes on you. And you'll find that you'll see a lot more backlash, the more freedom you have when you take your voice and take your money elsewhere to causes that mean more to you. So beyond the education takeover, right? You have the education takeover, you have the corporation takeover, and you stand up and say no. Along the lines of corporation takeover and education combined, you have bookstores and libraries seeping into this ideology. And I don't know if they're run by people who are progressive or this woke mentality, but you're seeing local bookstores and libraries fill children's sections with anti-racism journals and books. And that was one part of this woke movement, the anti-race. Everybody has to be anti-racist. You have to be less white. You have to think, more inclusive, an inclusive environment. There's nothing more inclusive than America, by the way. There's nothing more free and more diverse than being an American and being in America. Try going to the Middle East and see how diverse you are and diverse you want to push them to be. They'll likely behead you or cast you out. People don't understand how free we actually have it in this country to do some of the stupid things that people do here. You wouldn't be able to get away with it in any other country. So you have bookstores pushing these books on anti-racist to our children, the biggest generation influence. Because that's by design. The left wants to take your children and corrupt them and control them. It's all about mind control. The more they don't know about common sense and real, true history, the more they can control their mind and control their vote. The dumbing down of our generation is what's behind this woke movement. And so it's really important that we stand up and say, you know what? No, leave my kids alone. And the more you do that, the more you're going to see a pushback of grander proportions. We've seen that in elections. We've seen that locally here. Schools and stores and places had to rethink their woke movements because people are getting fed up. So you have bookstores, anti-racist books, right? You want your kids to learn to love everybody regardless of their background, right? Who doesn't? But you don't want to force upon them. You have a white kid who thinks he should be guilty for being white, and that's wrong. So beyond this anti-racist diversity movement that woke did, I discussed earlier, and then you have the sexualization. You go into the children's section at your local bookstore, and I did this recently. I went to a local store here and where I live, and if you're friends with me on Facebook, if you follow me, you know who I am. It's a store that my wife frequents. She loves to read. I'm learning to read, but I don't necessarily like to read as much as I should. But along with finding the anti-racist books, you find books on body and changing body. Now, there's nothing wrong with teaching your kids. As your body grows, it changes, right? As you go through puberty at a certain age, for boys and girls, it changes. You got hair, you got different things happening, you got hormones, all that flying around, right? And they teach this in schools. They teach puberty, they teach anatomy and physiology, they learn the basics, right? That's all that should be taught in schools. You should not be teaching sexuality courses or in explicit detail of identity, gender, transitioning, whatever this garbage is in schools today in bookstores. At the latest level of 7 to 10-year-olds, they're learning and seeing these graphic images of things they should never be seeing, for one, and two, shouldn't be even learning about until they're probably teenagers. And if you're a true moral person with a moral bone in their body, they shouldn't learn it from school. They should learn it from you. Anything about sex at all should be coming from parents. That's period. Your schools are required to teach basics on education levels. You can teach about sex, but keep it to a basic of, this is what happens with boys and girls. This is what happens as their body grows. They have hormones. They have this. All those basic things that should be taught in schools. Anything more than that, what boys and girls do, what happens here physically, what do boys do, what do girls do, that all should be left to the parents. So what does all this mean? What does all this wokeness means? What do we do? Where do we go from here, right? Well, like I talked about, it starts with saying no. And that's really the emphasis as I end this kind of definition or discussion on what it means to be woke and how do we go from here. Because I don't want you guys to be complacent. I don't want you guys to be sitting back and saying, well, it's not affecting me. I don't have kids in school. I don't go to the store. I don't do these things, so it doesn't affect me. When you do nothing and you're just an inactive participant, that's almost as bad as participating. If you don't believe in it, but you don't say something about it, then it's just run over, and it's just as bad as saying no. So by saying you don't vote because you're not interested or there's no point in it, then you're just as bad as voting for the left. You're just as bad. So I encourage you to think more consciously and think more intentionally about where your money goes and where your voice goes. Now, we live in a society in which a lot of things are run and economically ran by other countries and other things. So, the American first thing, buy more American. It might cost more. It might mean you have to do more work to find things to put your money towards that are good causes. But let me tell you, there are so many companies and places to put your money that are American first and conservative minded, just like you and I. And when you do your research, you'll find that there is other options. There are other options out there to fix this and combat this. We need to really build what Glenn Beck talks about on a parallel economy. Put your money into things that you believe in and get your money out of things that are corrupting society. The more we do this, the more it stops. So I just want to tell the audience this thing in summary. Don't buy into their pathetic attempt to say, well, we just want to be diverse. We just want to do this. We just want to be inclusive. Don't buy into it. It's nonsense. You know, from being a moral and just and common sense laden person, I would think, if you're like-minded like I am, you know that we are a diverse country. We know that we are not a racist country systemically. Are there bad people out there? Yes. Are there very rotten to the core, progressive nut jobs who force racism and force this anti-white thing out there? Yes. Are there weirdos who like to dress up in women's clothes and girls who want to be boys and boys who want to be girls? And that's coming down the pipeline as well for future discussion. That's a whole other story of, mess. But it really starts with not buying into their pathetic attempt at using these, oh, it's for the better of the country. We need to do this. You need to feel less guilty about who you are. You don't. Be happy who you are. White, black, Indian, Muslim, Jewish, African. Be happy who you are and be proud of who you are. This country is a diverse country built on values and conservative values. We are a republic, and we need to fight to keep it. And generations depend on us fighting it to keep it. So, please fight with me. Take your money to places that you believe in and share your beliefs, and start saying no, because that matters. Be sure to follow me on Facebook at The Ryan Mack Show and wherever you get your podcasts.